you think you're just living this small life and this small existence, and then you step back from that and you understand the power and beauty that the world holds and that you hold inside of you. And so that is liberating. Hello, I'm Valerie.
And I'm LaRell.
And Psychedelic saved our marriage.
We are here to discuss soul-alivening conversations around psychedelics, ritualistic habits, and tools.
We will investigate how to integrate these lessons to create healing in our relationships.
We believe when we surrender to the growth path of partnership and use it as a reflective mirror for self-awareness, we reach our highest potential.
So I thought we'd talk about what led us to psychedelics.
What did lead us to psychedelics?
So I think that we both were invested in a lot of different podcasts and growth-oriented folks, and I had started reading Gabor Mate's work years and years ago and sort of had an entry point into psychedelics, but I think that it wasn't sort of demystified or maybe even seen as something that I could or should do until probably a few months, probably about a year before we did our first journey, because we both attempted to do a small journey together. Do you remember that?
I do. I'm trying to remember what led us to doing that, whether it was...
I think it was a podcast or something that we had heard. First time we tried it, we both ended up maybe getting about a gram and feeling pretty weird the whole time. And so we kind of tabled it for probably about 9 months or so. I think it was like 9 months to a year.
Yeah, the first experience was just so exciting, and it was kind of fascinating. The trees looked a little different and I felt a little funny, but there was nothing really amazing about it. So
yeah, it's like we didn't even understand the potential value the after effects of that journey. I imagine that we both probably felt a lot better for a while after that, but I don't remember. And then it was around April of 2 years ago that we decided, almost 2 years ago, that we decided to really dive in. And I think at this point we had heard probably multiple podcasts, and I had probably done some reading on psychedelics, and then we decided to actually prep for a large journey in pursuit of healing, right?
Right. And,
yeah.
And going along with the name of our whole podcast, Psychedelic Saved My Marriage, of course, one of the things that led to it was a lot of self-healing and growth and trying to figure out how to navigate marriage and the little things that come up and
the big things that come up.
And it just seemed that psychedelics was possibly something that could finally help to resolve some past traumas that nothing else had been able to resolve.
Yeah, so we both definitely did our fair share of talk therapy, and we really hadn't gotten into any sort of somatic therapy, because somatic therapy proved to be pretty useful, even parts work and stuff.
Yeah.
But so LaRell went first.
Yes. I think it was somewhere around 3.5 to 4 grams that I took.
Yeah.
And it was just such a profound, life-changing experience that gave me access to new emotions that I had never really had access to before, never felt before. And I had realizations that made me realize my position in this earth and life and marriage. And it was like all of a sudden certain things just snapped and changed for me that literally made me feel like psychedelics saved my marriage. And there are so many different aspects to it, so many different things I've come to learn about myself and realizations I've had that are all part of going into saving my marriage with psychedelics. But
yeah, so in preparing for your trip, I of course like went all out. I read I read the Assisted Psychedelic Psychotherapy Manual from the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies and psilocybin, along with multitudes of other scientific peer-reviewed articles, as well as just lots of compiling of other folks' experiences, just so I could get a good handle on what I was doing, which is pretty funny thinking about that now, because how could I possibly have a handle on something that I didn't even really understand? And now we understand so much more about the medicine and how it's so much more about the relationship you have with the medicine, especially as somebody that's doing shaman type of or guiding type of work. So I think we both felt very prepared, but we literally had no idea, right?
Right.
Like, you had no idea what you were about to experience. And as you were experiencing what you were experiencing, and I was leading you through that experience, I also had no idea what you were experiencing. Just all of these emotions and laughing and crying and, and I mean, I remember looking at you and being like, I wonder if she's just gone insane, And the funny thing is that at this point, we had kind of demystified the cultural narratives and boundaries that leads to the false perception that psychedelics are poisoning you or harming your brain, but the cultural implication of being raised in a society in which that's the normalized narrative leads to some really deep internalized fears. And, now we've seen this multitudes of times of friends and in my work specifically, but it was just a really interesting experience to lead somebody through without even understanding the felt embodied experience of what was going on.
Right.
And so what were like some of your like biggest takeaways? Like what was the thing that by the end of it you were like, okay, it's your turn, Valerie, it's your turn? Because by the next weekend she was like, you're doing this next time, like get ready. And just recognizing so instantaneously the sort of change and the completely new understanding you had of the world.
I guess when I realized how it completely altered my perception of reality in such a way that it allowed me to make connections of things from my past, put things from my past together with the present, and it allowed me to understand why I perceive things the way I do, why I respond to things the way I do, and it just allowed me to experience all of this in such a profound way that I said, this is something that is so beneficial to so many people. I must learn more about this. As soon as I learned what it could do for me, I said, I have to learn about this as much as I can about it so I can help others benefit from it as well.
And it's interesting because you kind of intuitively knew how life-changing it was going to be before even the changes started to like integrate themselves. And of course it wasn't linear, and of course it took time to integrate these things, and then in your case, multitude of psychedelic experiences post. But I think the thing that at least I took away was that this sort of experience was so expansive and so liberating just to even have one time that I think it just engaged us both on such a level that was like, we can't put this down. We can't walk away from this.
Yeah, it became something so amazing and so profound that we realized this is something so powerful that we can't just not do something with it. We can't take our existing talents and knowledge and research it and study it. And I have spent countless hours studying other people's experiences, other people's psychedelic mushroom and LSD experiences, because I I like to build a picture in my mind of how it affects people so that I can better understand how to help other people with it. And I experiment with psychedelics myself so that I can gain an understanding of how it affects me and how to better help other people. That's my whole thing, is wanting to help other people with it. I love that it has tremendously benefited us and our marriage and myself and my life, but my big mission and goal in life is, now that I've learned this incredible, powerful tool, that I want to share it with others, and I want to learn the best ways to share it with others.
Yeah, and these experiences, and especially this first experience that we're talking to, I think did shift and alter the ways that we viewed ourselves and viewed the world. It was an expander. It was, you think you're just living this small life in this small existence, and then you step back from that and you understand the power and beauty that the world holds and that you hold inside of you. And so that is liberating. We talked about what led us to psychedelics. We talked a little bit about how we prepared for our trips. We talked a little bit about your trip. And then we kind of went broad about things. But specifically, I'm wondering if we could both speak to how that first mushroom trip changed everything. And you spoke about your experience. And did you want to speak at all to sort of like your realizations from childhood, or about, like going through all those experiences in your house, and how that kind of shifted and how you were able to understand that better and create a narrative around that?
Yeah, my first mushroom experience was really fascinating, because I dropped into a almost out-of-body experience, but I experienced a trip that was, it showed me my whole past childhood. I come from a Mormon childhood, a very Christian, conservative childhood, and of course that affected me a lot in my life, and there's a lot of ways it affected me in our marriage, and these things that keep coming up in our marriage because of my past traumas, my childhood, and the ways I was raised. And this very first psychedelic mushroom journey showed me my childhood in such a way that it allowed me to separate myself from it, I guess. It allowed me to see that was my childhood, those were the experiences I had, and that was back then, and this is now. And I remember there were some key events that happened in my childhood that I was holding on to, and I was still responding to things nowadays based on those events. And this journey showed me those events in a way that allowed me to recognize they were just simply events that happened in the past. And that, together with gaining access to all these new emotions and things, and having these memories of certain chronological timelines from my childhood, and understanding how it all affected me and where I lived and experiences I had, it just all came together in such a way in that very first journey that was so profound and moving that, yeah, I could never not be the same after such an experience.
Yeah. And I definitely had a similar experience, although I definitely had a challenging experience. But I think that, one of the things for me that I've spent so much of my time maybe trying to sort out through talk therapy or whatever is my childhood experiences, except for I couldn't remember my childhood or my childhood experiences. Like 4, 5, 6 years at a time were completely blocked out. And so I didn't really have, I knew stories, and I of course knew like I had also a very religious, evangelical, puritanical upbringing with a pretty, abusive household as well. And so both of us coming from these backgrounds of a lot of abuse, a lot of violence, a lot of chaos. And, I didn't realize all of the ways in which it impacted me, even down to the ways in which I was holding and patterning pain in my body, the ways in which I was dismissed. I mean, the most interesting thing about my journey, it was very falling in and out of all of these dreamy experiences and all of these different emotions as well, just opening up and recalibrating this full full window of emotions all at once, in rapid succession, and fear being a part of that as well, and a lot of existential stuff from being raised with the idea of eternal suffering, laced so strongly into the upbringing of my childhood. And so after this experience, I was probably dumbfounded. I had what you would call an ego death experience. So I kind of was definitely not myself after this experience. LaRell said I was really not myself. I mean, I'm a very sensitive person, and now knowing that and knowing how I respond to mushrooms so easily, much more sensitive than the average person for sure. It was such a big download to my system that it took me over a month to even begin to integrate it. And I'm still integrating this journey almost 2 years later. And that is how much work it did on me. And so the really interesting thing over the next month that was fascinating was I had these realizations everywhere I would go about just different things that happened to me in my childhood. I had forgotten that we had a cousin that had lived with us, and that turned out to be an extremely traumatic time that I completely completely shut out of my life 100%, had absolutely no recollection of it, or, remembering not being believed about an ear infection, all of these really small things that led to me showing up in my marriage in a way that was I wasn't being seen or wasn't being heard. Through this journey and through, learning about what psychedelics do, how they open up your brain and how you're connected back to these real lived experiences, it's you get to go back and witness yourself. And that, knowing what I know, being a psychotherapist and now doing somatic psychotherapy and learning the values of somatics so deeply, making a coherent narrative out of your childhood and your life allows you to actually be able to make sense and make meaning and move forward with healing and with recognition and with awareness. And so if you don't even have the awareness because you have blocked out memories, how in the world can you even come to that? So that was a really fascinating experience for me.
That's what used to trip me out, because she'd always say, I don't remember my childhood. I have very few memories from my childhood, but after that first mushroom journey, she just started coming up with these memories that I'd never heard of before. And when you don't even remember the things that happened to you as a child, it's really hard to resolve those traumas. It's really hard to resolve the things that happen if you don't even remember they happened to you.
Right, but they're still living inside of you. They're still very much impacting your nervous system and your unconscious. And that is the magic of the mushrooms, is they take all of your unconscious traumas and all of your unconscious processing and puts it forward into your conscious mind and allows the bridge between your unconscious and your conscious mind to sort out, while having the power of the mushrooms, while having the power of somebody outside of you witnessing this experience. And we were able to do this for each other, and through this build an entire new relationship in the way that we relate to each other.
Yeah.
Even though there was a lot, and still is a lot of walking out of trauma patterns. So yeah, what would you say the number one thing that the mushrooms gave to you? What's the number one thing you're grateful for from that first trip?
The one thing I'm most grateful for that first mushroom journey gave me was probably access to emotions. That was the weirdest thing for me, that I always thought I had access to emotions. I thought I could feel emotions, but I was not feeling emotions in the way you normally can, and that mushroom journey somehow gave me access to them. I remember telling Valerie, I was laying on the couch as I was having this experience, and I said, I feel everything. I literally said that because I did. I felt everything. I felt emotions I had never really had access to before, and I don't know if it's just that I wasn't aware of them, and somehow the mushrooms, the psychedelics gave my brain and my emotions, my body access to these feelings and emotions that I'd never really noticed before. But that was the most amazing thing. All of a sudden, from that point on, I was able to have access to emotions I just didn't really have before. Feelings of empathy and love and things that obviously are there in all human beings for the most part, at least to a certain extent. But I, for whatever reason, just I couldn't feel them, or didn't think I could, until that gave me access. And that's probably the thing I was most appreciative of that first journey, as well as all the realizations I had.
Yeah.
What was the thing you were most thankful for from your first journey?
Even just hearing you talk, I think about that, the idea of I feel like I have healed the biggest things in my life since that. And I think what it ultimately gave me is it gave me a connection back to myself. And my biggest takeaway from my journey was two things. It was every single thing exists, and everything inside of me that exists is okay. It's all okay. The good, the bad, the trauma, the pain, the light, the dark, that it all had a purpose and a reason, and that was all okay, and it's all part of the human experience. So it gave me this profound permission to let go of a lot of shame, I think. And then it gave me back access, connection, and back to myself, and access to being able to be in sovereignty with my body, and to really be able to enact that sovereignty through doing what's best for my body, and having that intuitive connection back to it. After having as much physical violent trauma and as much medical trauma as I had. And, I think it's from that jumping point and that access point of it opening me back up to that is what led me to be able to heal so many things that I was unaware of.
It's fascinating because we both came from really strict religious backgrounds. We both have had medical procedures done. So we both kind of lived with this feeling that we did not have our own sovereignty of our bodies, that we didn't have a right to do with our own bodies because we've been told our whole lives by religion, by the medical system, that we didn't. So that's fascinating. That was one of the takeaways for you.
Yeah, and your body being right and everything being okay. Because we're taught basic sin or basic badness, and that really steers you away from your ability to trust your body and to trust the signals and signs. And that's one of the biggest things that trauma does, is it disconnects you from your intuition. It connects you to the system of fight or flight or fawn or disassociation, either disassociation or hypervigilance, and you can't embody your life from that state of being. And so it's like a recalibration for your body and your mind and your heart, and leads you back to a place of self-compassion and connection to yourself and to things a lot larger than yourself, and a greater purpose and a greater meaning. And I think that it is no surprise that every single society in human existence other than ours has participated and communed with these medicines, because they are absolutely vital to the initiation process of being a human, to being able to deal with pain, to being able to deal with trusting ourselves and being in our own sovereignty and knowing what's right for us. And you're right, like having religion and all these things outside of ourselves telling us what's right or wrong, it gaslights you against your knowledge and your knowing. And being connected back to that is really the first step in healing. And being able to heal some of those really big traumas.
The craziness is that we're even talking about these as if it's some new amazing thing, because like you just said, for centuries and centuries, people have been using psychedelic mushrooms regularly. It's only in just the recent past that we have so ridiculously gone away from them. Normalcy is in using psychedelic mushrooms. That's normal.
Yeah, or whatever sort of like local native psychedelic substance that's available.
Right.
Yeah, it's been used forever.
We believe when we surrender to the growth path of partnership and use it as a reflective mirror for self-awareness, we reach our highest potential.